Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of this podcast from AI Academy. For those of you who missed the previous episode, I'm Helene, your host, and I lead all partnership activities. What we do with our partners at AI Academy is to help them experiment with AI and kickstart their company-wide transformation. Along the way, we met a lot of great people who successfully integrated AI into their workflows and already use it in many interesting ways. Now, my goal is to bring their stories to you, hoping to inspire your AI journey in your organization with this podcast. Today, I invited Dietmar Schlößer, who is going to join us and talk about his experience at TÜV NORD. Dietmar is the Director of Digitalization and Innovation, and he's been a key player in bringing AI into their organization. Hello, Dietmar. How are you?
Hi, Helen. I'm fine. Thank you very much. Yeah, quite excited to be here. Great topic. So I really look forward to it.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy that you took the time aside to talk to me as well. I thought it would be very interesting to show our listeners how an organization like TÜV NORD embraced AI, and the projects that you're also pushing forward internally are very interesting. So I'm going to start by asking you if you could tell a bit about what you're doing at TÜV NORD right now.
Sure. I'm responsible for digitalization and innovation for the TÜV NORD Group, which is quite an exciting and interesting role, given that we have 6 completely different business units. So we're under the soil, so with natural resources, a lot of functional safety stuff we're known for on the ground, but we're also in space because we're also testing satellite components and the like. So even involved in Mars missions. So you see, it's quite a big range of activities.
That's very interesting. I'm also thinking, before registering this episode with you, I had a look at the background of TÜV and noticed that TÜV NORD was founded in 1869. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. We're more than 150 years old.
So it's an organization that witnessed the development of technology from the beginning to today. And how does the organization keep the pace with digital technologies?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in fact, we were involved in all the industrial revolutions in some way. But what you can see and what has become different with, first of all, let's say the digital revolution, or now the proliferation of AI everywhere, is that the pace has really accelerated. I wasn't around 150 years ago, of course, so
Neither.
I don't know for sure, but I'm certain in a way that this was really completely different. It was definitely a challenge at the time for the people, but I think it's really the acceleration of, let's say, new technology that is really a big challenge. And that's why we really have to put more focus on innovation. So before that, we had much more time to get used to developments, but those cycles have really drastically been reduced. And that makes it difficult for us, but not just for us, I guess.
That's true. What I'm really amazed by with TÜV is that you have more than 10,000 employees, right? At TÜV
That's correct.
NORD. So when you're pushing forward projects, when you're trying to catch up with the technologies, how do you bring the people together with that journey?
Yeah, I think you have to be first of all, you have to be a bit humble, especially in an innovation role. It's like if you're working on things that are necessary for the future, you can't expect to really reach all the people or even the majority of people, because most people are busy doing the business of today. Yeah, so it's that's the first challenge. So I think it is really about getting people interested, really trying to find people that are passionate about driving new things, trying out new things, and then work with this community of people. Once you have then something that is usable, then of course you really have to reach out to as many people as possible. Giving you an example, the Corona pandemic was such a thing. We had an innovation team working on remote audit at a time when it was not needed. Nobody wanted it. Customers didn't want it. Regulators didn't want it. Our auditors didn't want it because they wanted to meet customers face to face. Well, during the pandemic, of course, that was no longer possible. And thank God our innovation team had developed something. All the processes were there. It was in line with regulatory requirements, and we could really scale it up during the pandemic. That's an example. So sometimes you have to wait for the right moment before you can scale something, but that doesn't mean you should not start working on it way before. So really try out new things. And of course, when this innovation team of ours tried that out and developed remote audit, they were not thinking about a global pandemic, of course. So it's not that they could foresee that. But you see, I mean, you have to be flexible, you have to be prepared, you have to be always moving and making sure that you can apply new technologies, even at a moment where you don't seem to need them yet. So that's, I think, that's the ever-present challenge that you have. Find enough people who are passionate about it to invest time.
That is true. That reminds me, actually, I think I saw it on your LinkedIn page. It says you should invent the future before waiting for future to come to you. I think you're a really good example to that, because I see in different organizations that there are some key players, in this case, like you at TÜV NORD, that are pushing this forward, that are people who are interested, that is curious, and that is constantly thinking, what does this technology mean for my job, for the people I work with? So I always mention that when I'm talking to companies as well. Also, Jenica, our founder, mentions it all the time, that we need one infected people, which is a bad example after the COVID, but there needs to be one person who is talking about it, who's reading about it, and who's keeping up with the latest news. So coming back to your role as a key player in this, what do you think is the most important thing for business leaders to keep in mind while bringing this to the company?
I think that's a very good question. I think it is also, I mean, it's mainly to take into account that the people involved in operational activities already have a job to do. And this is not a part-time job, it's a full-time job. So they have to make sure that the company earns money. And by the way, that's the money that is actually needed to fund innovation activities. And that whenever you are, let's say, enthusiastic about something, that you just don't drop it on the organization and hope that it somehow works. So what I often see, and it is also a challenge for us, is that people, I mean, they usually differentiate between top down and bottom up. When you look at these things, I mean, let's say the top executives, they have a clear view, and you don't need to really convince them that we have to do something about AI. Yeah, and they've been thinking that for quite a while. You have a lot of people, let's say at the bottom, if you want to call it that way, so really also operational people, who would like to try out, who would like to embrace this change. But then you have a lot of people in between that are measured against, let's say, KPIs of today's business. So there's really no incentive for them. There's a lot of pressure to make your numbers and so on. So there's not really a clear incentive for you to say, yeah, let's spend some more time on the future. It might actually hurt my numbers, but who cares? So I think what we really need to think, maybe in a lot of companies, is more like a middle out transformation or transition. So really to think it from that layer. So from the people who carry the burden of today's business, and create an environment in which they can actually, where they have the freedom and they have the opportunity to make use of those and are encouraged really to make use of new technologies. And that is really a big challenge. all these people that I refer to, it's not that they are not interested in doing that, but I mean, their constraints, their business constraints don't allow them to spend as much time as they would probably want to do on those new future relevant topics. And that is something that all business leaders have into account. It's not just enough to say our strategy says, or we have a new strategy now in place and we have to do such and such. You always have to think about how to make it work for the organization that you're responsible for. And I think that's the main challenge for a leader.
I think,
and
yeah,
there's no easy
that's
answer.
a very good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. We see maybe even if someone is very interested, they find it hard to create the time during the day while they need to keep up with their daily KPIs, as you mentioned. But as a business leader, how do you create incentives for employees to create the time or start their projects or at least do research on these things? I know that you do, but I want to hear from your point of view a little bit.
I think you really have to be close to your people. You have to be curious. You have to be interested in people, and really understand what keeps them going, what motivates them, and really have a conversation, and really start with small things where you say, okay, that probably doesn't need so much time, but why don't you try this, and really ask for their ideas, ask for the things that they can envision, and then trying to find, room, free time, some space for them to try that out. And it doesn't need to be big. It can be very small things, but really to build on what drives them, because then they will find the time. That's my personal experience. And I think as a leader, you have to encourage that. You have to show them that you appreciate this, that you don't think that they should really be working on all the operational tasks that are still there, but that you want them to spend some time at least on the things that they develop passion for. This is not a silver bullet, I know that. So this is really hard work, and it requires that you really have to work with the individuals that are there. And it doesn't mean that if you do it once, you can do the same with another group of people. No, you have to start from scratch. And I think you really have to understand that. You have to get to know the people. You have to understand them. And then really start doing these things. And my experience is you will not, of course, not everybody will do that then. But that's also not the goal. But you will always find people. And that's my key statement, no matter where you are, that will actually move, that will actually do things that will amaze you, that will surprise you, that you did not expect. And I think you should just be curious and let that happen. So as I would say, don't, I know it sounds so easy, but it's very hard. But don't see, when you look at people, don't see what is there today, but what could be. You never know whether that happens, but always thinking in terms of potentials. And that's a mindset question that you have to solve for yourself as leader. And that's usually, it doesn't always work, of course not, but most of the time, and that's my personal experience, it does. And their people will surprise you. They will do things you never expect.
I think I agree with that a lot because, for example, within AI Academy, we have this idea that we need to be the people who use AI, who know AI, and who test things out all the time because we're the people who are, kind of leading companies in their AI journeys, and we're communicating this all the time. So what we're doing internally is to really try to create the time, because we realize if you don't put the time aside to test out the new tools or read the news, even if you're curious, even if you're interested, you just focus on the daily work and you just get lost in it. I've experienced it within my work as well. I was talking to the team, telling them, I'm really interested, I want to try this and that. But if I don't put that on my calendar and say, okay, Friday morning until 12, I'm just going to test out the new things, it doesn't happen. So we're really careful in putting that time aside with the whole team. Every month we have an internal hackathon that we do, and we choose one of the problems that we have and we solve that with AI. So even having that time there each month makes us use the curiosity and the interest that we already have and put it in practice. So I think that's a very important point that the business leaders also should be careful about. I've seen great stuff at TÜV NORD so far. I don't think I've mentioned TÜV NORD is a long-term partner of ours. We do a lot of things together as well, right? So it's been great to get to know the people that you work with, to see how you lead the organization, and you put the vision of constantly innovating itself, kind of. I don't know if that makes sense, but I see that you put people in the situations where they feel comfortable trying new things, making time for it, because you make time for it before everything. So I think that's very valuable. Another thing that I had in mind is regarding the strategy. When I talk to companies, I realize that a lot of business leaders think about what kind of strategy that should be out there for their organization when it comes to AI, because it changes so fast and so quickly that organizations struggle to even understand if the strategy should be for 3 months or 6 months or a year. So there's a big confusion out there regarding that as well. So I'm wondering your thoughts about this. How do you think companies should approach their long-term ideas and strategies with AI?
Again, a very good and hard question to answer. So I'm not sure there's the perfect recipe for that. But what I think is you really have to see how. I mean, you have to have a look at your organization, at your organizational culture, and whatever you do, the strategy and the approach or the strategy process has to be in line with your organizational culture. So you can have the best strategy on earth. If people don't get it, if they don't feel involved, it won't happen. It's as easy as that. What is not easy is to do it the right way. So I think it's more like it's probably an iterative thing. So what I think, and that's nothing new, really create a vision of the future, really see, is that something where we can imagine ourselves? And then from there, trying to develop things to do that would get us there. I think what has changed over the years, to be honest, so when I started my professional career, I think the idea was that you could actually, like a waterfall model or project, could then also describe the exact path of implementation. I think you should, if you still believe that, you should probably reconsider this idea, because I think that does no longer work. So I think what you need to allow is that, you clearly define the what. So this is what we're trying to achieve, but then you leave a lot of room for the how, as much room as possible for people to find the way to get there. That's one thing. The other thing is also, and that is something that I experienced actually at Procter & Gamble. So it was my first, let's say, the first company I worked for. Is really what I experienced there was really to enable each part of the organization to develop a strategy for themselves. So there was an overall strategy, but putting a lot of time and investing a lot of time in building capabilities to come up with your own strategy for your business segment, for your organization, for your department. So it was really broken down. So really invest in strategic capabilities of people. It sounds maybe much more fancy than it is actually. And it's really about making up your mind and where do I want to be? Where should we be given the framework that we have, or the let's say the constraints given by the overall strategy, and then define that. That was very powerful, and that's what I also try to do. Really, not to be too detailed, but rather give more overall an overall vision or overall goals, and then really try to work towards it. For this, by the way, we've now introduced for a new strategy process strategic foresight, because it helps people, or it lifts people out of the urgency of today, by thinking about possible futures. So not necessarily trying to predict how the world for us is going to be in 2035, but really come up with certain alternatives that build like a space of possible futures. And then for each scenario, try to find out, okay, so what would make us successful there? And then by backcasting to today, okay, so which steps would I need to take that would actually go there? And you use that as a compass, you know? So I know which direction I need to go. I don't have the answers now, but let's see and check, if I do this, will it help me get closer to where I want to be in 10 years from now? So things like that, and really enable and encourage people to think that way, is probably, in my opinion, a good way to approach this. Because in the end, this is about managing uncertainty. There is uncertainty. Nobody knows not even how the world's going to look like in 1 year from now. So, and I'm very confident in saying that. We talked about the pandemic earlier. Mm-hmm. Things can happen that you don't expect. But it's like how you deal with this uncertainty, and actually also addressing the fear that might be there, because uncertainty can create fear. And I think it's very important to address that in a proactive way. Fear is nothing bad. I mean, fear is there for a reason. I think it has helped us survive in earlier times. So it's nothing bad. It's just the way how we deal with it, and what we do with it, that decides whether we're successful or not.
What you just told me sounds more like a mindset shift other than just another approach to business. Because before, the strategy was something that you built, that you foresee 3 years from now, 5 years from now. But now when I talk to companies, when I hear someone organizing their AI strategy for 5 years from now, I'm thinking, we're not sure what's going to happen in the next 6 months. And what you said make a lot of sense, because it is clever to be prepared. It's clever to experiment, try to understand what are the capabilities, try to foresee what could be the next thing that's coming after the developments that we heard in the past months on AI. But it is definitely very important to be flexible and be able to adapt into what's going on outside of the organization as well. And I really liked also how you talked about having departments or different groups in the organization plan their own strategy. I think that's very valuable, because when there are new developments in AI, it means something else for marketing. It means something else for HR. It means something else for the product teams. It depends on the organization, but it is very hard to have one person who would be able to follow all that. So if the strategy responsibility is also on one person, one business leader only, some part is going to have problems catching up. That's why we think it's very important as well that everyone in the organization is aware and they know the capabilities of the technology. They experiment with it. Not everyone needs to be an expert, but people who have their domain knowledge, who are really good at what they're doing, they're the people that's going to be able to imagine what can be done with AI when it comes to their day-to-day business as well. So yeah, that sounds very interesting, and I think that's a good message to leave companies with. So I want to ask you, I also see that we're slowly running out of time. So I want to ask you, what would be the last message that you want to communicate to companies that are hesitant in starting their AI journey in their organization?
I think you start small. That would be probably my first advice. Don't go for the big thing because I personally don't think that that the chances of being successful are that high if you try that. You might be lucky, so I'm not saying it's impossible, but I wouldn't do that. So start small, gain experience. You have to familiarize yourself with this, and you have to get a feel for what's possible and what is probably not possible. Also for what is possible in your organization, because that might be completely different. As you mentioned, I mean, with your example, like in marketing, it might mean something else for this, but that also holds for companies. It's like in our company or in our organization, something might work which doesn't work elsewhere, and vice versa. So be open for that. And I think focus on the non-technological aspects of things, because and that is something I think that won't change with AI. So I've seen that with a lot of technologies in the IT space. The technology is usually not the problem. So also I think AI will become a commodity. We're on the way of having AI as a commodity. Is there. You don't need to become an expert on large language models and the like. It's more like asking yourself what you want to use it for and how you do that in an appropriate way. So say ethical, in line with values, with overall values, with organizational values, and rather spend time on this. So really work with people because, and that is what we should not forget, this technology, and I think that AI is really not just a hype. It is there to stay, and I think it has revolutionary potential in the sense that it will change the way we live. I'm convinced of that, and if that's true, let's see whether I'm right. But let's assume for a second that I'm right. Then we have to ask the question: what will it do for us? How will it change the way we interact, we behave as human beings? What impact will it have within the organization? And you don't have to ask this in a philosophical or abstract way. It's really, what will it do to us? What will it do to us in this team, in this department, in this business unit? And that's, I think, a good starting point to really try to look at it from a human perspective, and also identify what we need to do, how I need to change, how we need to change, what we need to, how we need probably to adapt to. And that is a difficult process. You can't do that in one step. And I think that's why it is so important to experiment, to go in iterations, and then learn while you're experimenting and going for the next iteration. That's, I think, the way we should approach it. And it will have drastic implications. I mean, just one thing that is currently, I think, being debated is that people have like a personal relationship with an AI, because the AI has been trained on empathy, and they can't stop. They get addicted. Yeah, so they don't want to. Yeah, so it's very singular stories right now. So it's just a few here and there. But this is as an example what it might mean. So what impact it will have on humans,
Exactly.
and how we stay in a way in control. So how we stay human.
Exactly.
You could probably say. So that's the most important thing, and that is something that we all have to do. And I think we all have to get more educated about AI, but not necessarily about the technology. We have to understand how it works. Yes. But we should really focus on how it could change us.
That's very true. I also see a lot of difference when we have events with companies, when we do practical exercises, workshops. I see a lot of people that change their minds and change their approach to interacting with the technology after they try out some of the things that they can do, because education is so important that after understanding how the technology works, it gets more and more difficult to start thinking that you're interacting with a human. That's the most common mistake probably that we're seeing right now, that people think, okay, I asked ChatGPT this, and then it gave me this response, and the conversation is as if you're talking to a human being. But once people understand the statistical approach behind it, how large language model works, it gets very difficult to believe in such a thing as well. So I think that's why it's very valuable. And my favorite part of what we do is when we put a bunch of people together in a room, and we give them practical exercises, and they try out something new with, we say ChatGPT because it's the most famous one now, but any large language model. And within the same exercise, we see 50 people getting completely different results. And that is the moment where I see in people's eyes that they see, okay, then it's not the technology, it's how I use it. So I think most of the frustration from the results coming from large language models comes from a very human problem of not really knowing what you want. Because if you know really well what you want to get out of that interaction, the result changes drastically. We see that with our master in prompt engineering courses as well, what students are doing. And a lot of people, once they frame their interest, their needs, what they want to do well, they see that the result that they get is completely different as well. So as you said, it's a very human problem at the end of the day, most of the things that we deal with right now.
Yeah, and I think it is also a bit going back to the roots. And now I get a bit philosophical. Sorry for that. But let's say from a European cultural background, I would say already the ancient Greeks developed a capability that is highly valuable, probably even more valuable than ever before. That is critical thinking. Really to ask questions, to really try to understand, to test hypothesis. So that's very old. You can go to other cultural backgrounds. So the Babylonians already had algorithms. So we know that from archaeology. I'm pretty sure that there were very smart people in India or China, even 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. And it's really going back to those roots. In the end, it is about critical thinking, really questioning what you do and really trying to understand what is the appropriate way of using it. And that is maybe a reminder for all of us to do this, because if you look at things like, let it be fake news, deep fakes, whatever, I think critical thinking is probably the most valuable asset or the ability to think that way that we have. And that's also what we need to really reflect on what we're doing there. So that's why iterations are so important, because it gives you time to reflect about the mini step that you've taken, what conclusions you take, what that means for you. This is so important.
I definitely agree. That's very important. That also for that, I think sometimes we need to just put aside the time just to think about things, because it's within the technology that we have around now, notifications, everything, AI, there are news every day. It gets so easy to just get lost in what's out there without really do the critical thinking, as you mentioned, and saying, okay, but what does that mean? Is that something that I want to do? Is that something I don't want to do? Or just making this like questioning in general. But yeah, you're very right. I'm slowly going to close our episode because I feel like we can just continue talking until tomorrow about these. It's very interesting.
True.
That's true. Thank you so much, Dietmar, for coming. It's been such a pleasure to have you and listen to your experience within your background as well. It was super valuable. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.